for being here tonight. Okay, and this is happening now. We have the Women in Agile in Tampa is I am concerned about the feedback. Are you able to mute folks, Diana, and then just ask?
Yep, I think they're muted now. I think we're good.
Nice. And we invite you to unmute when you want to chat. So anyway, our organizers, first of all, Diana, who I was just asking to help, she has one of our roles tonight as producing our presentation tonight. And Diana is a fairly recent joiner. She came to us this year after presenting in December, just an amazing presentation. And she's been extremely energizing for us as we are starting to get more involved again with the community. I think we've shared with y'all in the past that we did drop off some during mid-COVID because some of our other organizers had concerns in their life where they had to step back a little, which is not unusual probably for a lot of us. We've experienced that whether personally or in family or team members who had their worlds shaken up a little bit. My next co-host is Jessica. Jessica Deal is just amazing. She's been with us from pretty much the start, and this group would not have stayed together without her. She's the glue. So thank you very much, Jessica. And then me, I'm Vicki Braun. I did post my LinkedIn in the chat, and please feel free to reach out to us. We'd love to join you, and we'd love to hear more from you as a community. Until we do that later in the evening, I want to go ahead and get started on what you can expect tonight. So we've already had a little bit of networking and an icebreaker. Next, we're going to hear directly from Cherie. And then at the end of the evening, we will wrap up a little bit and we'll probably be asking for some of your feedback. Now, I believe Cherie has indicated that she would like this presentation not to be just a lecture. She welcomes questions. So again, if you feel comfortable asking them verbally, go ahead and take yourself off mute and do that. We welcome your input. If you're a little less comfortable with that, feel free to post in chat and we will ask for you. Also, just to let you know that we are promoting Tampa Women in Agile in social media. So if you ever have hesitation about your image being captured, feel free to take yourself off video. And I want to go ahead and start the event by chatting with you just a little bit about Cherie. She is so gracious tonight in presenting to us because she is a very busy woman. You may have already seen that she's extremely active in our Agile community. And by that, I mean that she's a coach of many stripes with many organizations, and she even has her own coaching academy where she's the director of education. And in addition to that, she's the co-author of a best-selling book called Enterprise Agile Coaching, Sustaining Organizational Change Through Invitational Agile Coaching. And we are definitely going to be posting that link in the chat. And I especially love the mission statement that Cherie embraces, and that is that she wants to leave every person better than when she found them, and with every encounter. That just so love, it resonates with me quite a bit. So Cherie, I'd love to go ahead and invite you to start our chat tonight, and go ahead and I'll stop sharing so that you can take over.
All right, sounds great. Happy to be here. And as Vicki mentioned, definitely want to be able to interact with everybody. So feel free to jump in with questions that you may have along the way. This is a collaborative conversation that I want to have. I am trying to shift. Okay, I had to shift the images so I could see both you all and the slides. So this is the book that Vicky just mentioned, there is a link in the chat. My book is really about how do you do this enterprise coaching thing. It doesn't teach Agile because it's not really about Agile. It's about getting business results. And so it's about how do you work with organizations from a change perspective and help them to improve. And a big part of the thing that you're doing when you're coaching organizations is you're influencing without authority. And thus the topic that we have here tonight that we'll be talking about. And so just two quick questions here. And I'd love to hear some of your thoughts about this. So in your experience, how often do you have to try to influence people, your peers or teams, maybe leaders, and you're expected to make change and to help the organization change, but you're not actually given the authority to make any change, right? Come here, get everything done, change stuff, fix stuff, improve stuff, and do it without authority, right? What's been your experience with that?
I think it's 100% of the time for me. I never had an authority in this role. Except this time is a little strange. They're giving authority to implement process, but in my head, it's like that's not gonna work, right? I gotta like influence others so they don't get like, what are you doing here kind of situation.
Right, because you can't make change for people.
Exactly.
They have to make the change for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, and so what happens when you don't actually have the power to make change? But yet you still have to do it, right? How are some of the ways that y'all influence people?
I think, go ahead. I think
Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. I've been a dance teacher for a long time, and I'm kind of trying to transition into this Agile Scrum Master role. But when I was a teacher, one thing I found is that if I want a student to do something, I ask them questions about what they want, what they need, until they kind of guide themselves there. So I don't have to tell them anything. I just ask them strategic questions. They come to the conclusion on their own, and then I don't really have to do a lot of convincing.
Nice. Yeah, convincing is hard.
Sometimes it doesn't. Mostly it does, though.
Yeah, convincing's hard, but when people want to do things that they want to do, a friend of mine always says nobody ever resisted the change or that they decided to do, right? Nobody resists the plan that they made. What they resist is your plan and your change. And so that's a big part of influencing, is recognizing how people want to be treated and how people want to be seen and what actually motivates people to do things. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So this picture here, train wreck, I'm wondering if you've ever had an experience where you've tried to work with maybe a team or some people, an organization, whatever, maybe even in your own home. I heard some of you earlier talking about, I wish I could influence my kids, where you had the best plans. You started trying to make things happen, right? You started maybe telling people what to do, telling people how it should be. This is the way we're supposed to do it. This is the way we're going to do it. And what you ended up with was a big train wreck, right? Does that ever happen to anybody else? I can tell you a story of when it's happened to me.
Only all the time.
Only all the time. And so what do you think causes that train wreck? What's the pivotal piece that makes people like say, nope, I'm not doing this?
I think not having buy-in. So because we might not always provide an opportunity to let folks weigh in. sometimes some of these directions are being, quote, shoved down their throats.
Yeah, that's a big piece of it. And Storm?
Yeah, so I find that I approach, number one, I've been fortunate enough to work at an organization which I was empowered to be that change agent. And so I think leadership and the cultural kind of norms or organizational culture has a lot to do with it, number one. But number two, I know that I don't know everything. As a matter of fact, the more that I learn, the more I realize I don't know. And so when I'm going in, and even if I believe I have a better way of doing things, or my better way is based on my personal biases and my personal experiences, and some of those may be great ideas and maybe the right ideas, but some of them might not be. And so I think it's really important to take a pulse check and really understand, the problems that we're trying to solve, and then understand that the people that we're working with and what they can contribute. So this helps to create that buy-in. So I want to hear what you have to say. I want to hear your experiences, and I want to hear, what issues you're coming across, and what problems are we trying to solve here. And then let's come together. Here's my experience. Here's some things that I found that work, right? Have you ever had these kind of experiences? So I think that that isn't dependent on the culture necessarily always received well. It seems really easy, right? But if you have this very command and control kind of environment, somebody just wants you to come in and tell them what to do to fix it, right?
What's that?
So it can be real positive and negative.
Oh, so
Yeah, and so that's a big piece of it, right? It's that giving other people the power to make decisions. It's recognizing the way you interact with people. I think there's one more piece in here that really connects to this. It's going to be different for different people. It's that you're working with systems and different systems. So even though you have what appears to be the same problem, maybe in one team as you have in another team, or in one company as you have in another company, on the surface, it's the same problem. The reason why you don't want to come in and just say, okay, here's the solution, is because just because the problem on the surface looks the same doesn't mean the solution's the same. And it's because you're working with different systems. There's a different political system, there's a different technical system, there's a different process system, it's a different human system. And so the same symptoms might not have the same root causes, and it might not have the same solutions. And this is why you don't want to take what you know in your experience and start just plugging it in to people, or saying, here's the book, this is what you should do because this is what the book says, right? I get a very nervous when I start hearing companies say, well, we want everybody to be doing the same thing. That's what Agile is for us. We want everybody to do the same thing. There's this good thing that's happening on one team. How do we make everybody else do that? Well, just because it's working for that team doesn't mean it'll work for every team. And so there's that slowing down and saying, hold on, what's the problem you're trying to solve by applying this across the board, right? So there's definitely this component of thinking from a systemic nature. And when you actually focus on the problem that they're having, you're going to have more influence, because people know that you're in it for them and not for you, right? Some of the train wrecks, or I'll say one of the biggest train wrecks that I've had in my career as an Agile coach, came from my thinking that I knew everything And it was before I learned more and then realized that, oh no, I don't know anything, right? The more I learn, the less I know. And this was an incident where I was working with a company as an Agile coach. So I'd been doing this long enough to know better by then, but I obviously didn't. And I had this attitude about, well, project managers, and there's no project managers in Scrum. I don't like, you don't even have a place here, right? I had a very uppity attitude about project managers and what they were doing, even though they were being Scrum masters and different things. And so basically what I was doing was I was taking what I knew from the book, and I was like, nope, that's not what the book says. This is the way it works, right? There's no project managers in Agile. There's no this, there's no that. Maybe you've heard this phrase as that's not Agile, right? That's not Agile. That was before I learned that I probably didn't know what Agile was. Right. And so what that did was it just created a train wreck. All that happened was it created resistance, and it created an environment where people didn't trust me and they didn't want to do anything that it didn't matter how great my ideas were. They didn't want anything to do with them because they knew I didn't respect them. Right. And so when there's no respect, then this is when the train wrecks happen, right? And so as we kind of go through and we think about, here's this train wreck, this happens often to a lot of people. It's one of the first ways you learn as an Agile coach. So if you're in the middle of a train wreck right now, that's okay. It's just an indicator to you that you have an opportunity to influence people without authority. And so resistance, as an Agile coach and as a trainer of Agile coaches, one of the biggest questions I get, like the top question that people ask me more than anything else, is how do you handle resistance? Right? How do you deal with resistance? Now, my first answer to this is a bit tongue-in-cheek, but it's like, stop creating it. Right? We think that people resist Agile. We think that people resist coaching, when really often they're resisting us. Right? So it's the way we interact with people that often creates the resistance. So, so if we think of, how do I stop creating resistance? Well, there's a couple of things. The first is that you will create resistance. We talked about respect, right? You'll create resistance if people don't think you respect them. You'll also create resistance if people think you're trying to force your agenda on them. You're trying to force what you want on them, right? Think about, let's just imagine for a moment, maybe if you're married, you have a family, you have some in-laws. If you're not, just kind of imagine for a moment, you have this wonderful mother-in-law who just knows everything, and she can run your house like nobody's business, right? And so what happens if that mother-in-law comes over and you're cooking dinner and she's like, oh, you're cutting those vegetables wrong. Hold on, let me show you how to cut those vegetables. Oh, wait, that's not the right ingredients for this meal. Wait, you have to do this instead. And she goes in your cabinet to get a pot, and she's like, why are the pots here? The plates are supposed to be here. Right. And so she opens that cabinet and she starts moving things, and she's like, why are your spices over here? They should be over here. This is not the way you do things. And she starts just rearranging your world for you because she knows better how your world should be. So I'd love to hear from you. How welcome do you think her help is going to be for you? Are you going to love it?
I gotta say, I was laughing literally the entire time you were saying that, I even posted on LinkedIn that I love that quote, about stop creating the resistance. It's like, duh, you know, quite often I think that we are so concerned that we're going to encounter resistance and we expect it, and we might inadvertently be supporting that. So that's a very interesting concept. I'd love to hear what others have to share.
How much of it also, a lot of times we kind of fly in as coaches or scrum masters. We could be from an alien planet. We're not part of the company. We're not part of the culture. Oftentimes, we're not even called by a title. We're called consultants or contingent workers or contractors, all these things to separate out. That's a breach that sometimes gets hard because you're not coming in as the expert. You're coming in as, well, we've been dealing with this. You don't really know. You don't know the product. You don't know the process. So is that creating a barrier, or is that something we can actually maybe use to our advantage to say, we don't know, so you share that and I share this?
Right. There's this thing about what you're talking about here is like the ability to be vulnerable and not have to know everything. Right. And so if you want people to be influenced by you, the worst way to do it is to prove to everybody how much you know. Right. Max Lucado has this quote that I've always loved, and it's, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Don't come in here and tell me how great you are, and in the process, tell me how not great I am. Right. And so we want to create an environment where we're not creating resistance. People resist for multiple reasons. Some people resist Agile, like if you're trying to do Agile, or they resist change, right? Because change is hard and nobody loves change, especially if they don't understand the reason for the change, right? If you want people to make changes, number one, it has to be for their benefit and not your benefit, right? What incentive does anybody have to make you successful? This is where a lot of coaches go wrong, because they make the people in the organization feel like, well, you're only trying to be successful. If you get this Agile thing to happen, if you get this change to happen, then you get your bonus. Great, wonderful. What do I get out of this? Other than a headache and a bunch of change that I didn't ask for, and a bunch of overhead that doesn't even make sense to me. Right. And so we don't want to create resistance. Instead, what you want to do is you want to focus. If you want people to not resist, you want to focus on their agenda, not your agenda. Right. What's their problem, not what's your problem. You know a bunch of stuff. That's a given. They wouldn't have hired you if you didn't know a bunch of stuff. When you are dealing with people who are resisting, or if you're already dealing with people who are resisting, this is a way to change it. Better yet, don't create resistance by starting this way, right? You want to find out not what is bothering you, but what is bothering them. Often coaches have this method of going into companies, right? I'm going to join your team. I'm going to join your organization or your company, and I'm going to do some assessment. And I'm going to assess how you're doing. Are you doing Agile? Are you doing things right? Are you doing things wrong? Managers, what are you doing? Are you telling people what to do? All this stuff, and I'm going to come assess you, and then I'm going to tell you all the things you're doing wrong and how you should be doing them if you were doing it right. That's actually not the right focus, right? Because Agile, number one, is not the goal. Agile's never the goal. If Agile is your goal, then you've got the wrong goal. Agile is never the purpose. Agile is a solution. It's one solution. And what you should be focusing on is business results. What are the results that they're trying to get that they can't get What is hindering them from being successful? What is stopping them from sleeping at night? What's frustrating them? Put their agenda first. And the beautiful thing about it is all the stuff that you see that they're not doing right, that you have this desire to say, that's not right, do this, do this, do this, do this. All that stuff is what's going to solve their problem. You know that. However, what they don't know is the problem. So we come and we try to give people solutions, but they don't know the problem. So then your solution just feels like you're trying to take over and tell them what to do. And like you're telling them they don't know how to do their job. Right. And so instead, if you focus on their problem and you ask them, well, what things are bothering you? What's not working for you? If we could focus on one thing that would make you feel more effective, what should we focus on? Don't worry about the things that you see that are not working right and that they've got to hurry up and get fixed. Worry about their biggest problems first. If you've got some solutions from Agile that'll solve that, great. Offer that. Offer several things and let them figure out what they want to do. Right? Because the truth is, especially if you're an external person, you don't know the answer to their problem because you will never know their company as well as they do. Right? They know what'll work in their company. They know what won't work in their company. They've got history that you don't have. And it's a matter of partnership, right? It's a matter of partnership, right? We want to I'm working on a laptop, so I have y'all really big in front of me, and I can't always see the screen behind you. So what they're looking for is partnership, right? They don't need compliance. They need someone to come in and be their partner. And you're mixing your expertise and your experience in the industry, your experience as a coach and as a change agent, and with Agile, with their experience and their expertise about their own company. We often try to influence people with our knowledge and with our experience. But really what people need is a partner who's going to be invested in the change that they're invested in. Right. And so it's not about compliance to Agile. It's about what do you need and how can I mix what I know with what you know? And how can we experiment together to get where you want to be? There is not a single right answer. The only answer that is always true is it depends, right? Because there's never a single right answer. It doesn't matter what the problem is. Now, you may see that I know I work in a bunch of different companies and I see the same problems come up over and over and over. I don't pretend to know the answer. Now, I will say, hey, here's what I've seen other people do, and here's what's helped them. How does that sound for you? Does it sound like any of this stuff give you ideas, or does any of this stuff sound like stuff you want to try? Right? It's okay if they say no. It's about partnering with them to help them build experiments to figure out how are they going to resolve their problems. So I want to stop for just a minute, pull the slides out the way, and let's chat. What's coming up for you all in your mind as you hear some of these things?
Cherie, you said something that resonated with me. As we're on the plight, I'm a change agent as well. And it's so important to understand where they've come from. Like, where was their journey before you came there? How did they get there? And then where is it that they want to go? Because I feel like there's something in honoring, even if they're not doing Agile right, or maybe, they've had a lot of challenges, they're not getting the outcomes that they want. And so they know they have to make some changes, but something about honoring what they've tried. And I love that you said experiment, because they experimented and maybe it didn't work. That's okay. What did you learn from that that will bring you forward in your moving forward journey? So I think that was so key that you captured that.
Mm. And I love that you use the word honored, because the reality of making any change is that you cannot have something new until you honor what is already there. It doesn't matter what they're doing today. There are some things there that are good, and they are there for a reason. Everybody does the best they can in the moment they have, with the information they have and the resources they have today, at the moment I made this decision, right? And so when people are, when they've got kind of what you might look at and say, well, this is strange the way they're doing this, it's only strange because you've never seen that before. The reality is it's a valid solution to some problem that they either have now or they had in the past. And then this is what they could do to solve it. This is their workaround, or this is their solution, right? The question is today that the best solution, right? Is it the best solution now? Does the problem even still exist? And do you have anything that you can add to them that will help them say, oh, well, maybe there's other solutions that we can experiment with? Stacy, did you want to add something?
Yeah, I think also sometimes the resistance isn't at the team level. Sometimes it's above them, or it's actually coming from the people who are trying to be agile, and they're, it's a little skewed up there. So the team doesn't, you can experiment, but they become micro experiments, and it's hard to push that. You could have influence there, but then if you can't move the big things, I think you risk losing that.
Yeah.
Because you know what the problem is, you all know what the problem is, but nobody can fix it. So you can't help them, and they were right back where they were. So it's not the agile, you're right, it's not the agile, it's, is there anything that can really move the needle forward? And
right,
not breaking that relationship of trust that took so hard to build.
And I think there's also this question here of, are you wanting change that they don't want? Right. Because there's this piece here about understanding the kind of engagement you're in.
Mhm.
Are you in an engagement where really all they want you to do is plug and play Scrum or Kanban or something like that? We just want Scrum, that's it. One of the big frustrations I see for Agile coaches is they're in one type of engagement and they think they're in another. Coaches always think they're in Agile transformation. We're changing everything. We're fixing everything. Everything's going to be grand when we leave. And then the reality is they're in an engagement where they just want you to teach people how to do Scrum, and that's it. And we don't really want to change above the team level, right? So there's this process adoption, Scrum adoption, Kanban, whatever it is, or I would say installation, really. The next level of change is adoption, Agile, or Agile adoption, right? Not transformation, but adoption. And that usually means that probably engineering, maybe product management areas are willing to change, and they're willing to make some pretty big changes. Some of it might be organizational structure. Some of it might be getting new roles, things like that. And that's what I think a lot of the engagements that we're on are. And it's recognizing that the amount of change you can do in an engagement, it caps at the level of leadership that is willing to change, right? And so if you're in an engagement that only the layer of management right above the teams is willing to change, and maybe they're not even willing to change, you're only going to get an installation. That's it. We can do Scrum. We can't really make any other changes. And then even as you get to adoption, you can only make the number of changes that the highest person willing to make change, the highest person with power willing to make change will make, right? And so if your middle managers aren't willing to change, then you can only do as much as covers there. You maybe your CTO, is ready, your product manager, your chief product manager, or whatever they call them in your organization, is ready to change. And they're ready to do all this change, and they're willing. You're going to get a lot accomplished, and then you're still going to hit the ceiling at some point when things go outside of those two organizations where your product owner, your product manager, and your technology officer control things, right? And so when you think about things like hiring policies and pay structure and bonus structure and things like your contracts, you're making waterfall contracts, not agile contracts, things like your sales, things like funding and capitalization, right? If those things don't change, you're still going to run into problems, right? So you can only make as much change as the people you're working with have the power to change and the desire to change. And so this is why it's really important. If we come back and think about professional coaching skills and professional coaching mindset, one of the key things about the coaching mindset is this. It's seeing our clients, and I would classify clients as everyone that you're coaching in the organization, teams, individuals, what have you. It's seeing them as competent, creative, resourceful, and unbroken. Right? You're not there to fix them. They know what they're doing. And so it's being able to recognize that they have the ability to make the decisions about what they want to change and what they don't want to change. And that sometimes it's a business decision to not make those changes. Right? And so when we interact with people from this mindset that they're competent, creative, resourceful, and they don't need us to fix them, it impacts the way we work with them. You can know if you're seeing people this way. To me, there's a very, very easy test. When you see weird things happening or people are doing whatever it is they're doing, if you find yourself getting frustrated, maybe even angry, if you're like, oh, what are these people doing? Right? That's an indicator that you're not seeing people this way. When you really see people this way and they do these weird things, yeah, your first reaction might be, what in the world? And then you get really curious. I wonder why they're doing it this way. I wonder why they're responding this way. I wonder why they're behaving this way. Right. And so when you think about managers, what I see people in these coaching roles do so often is this weird thing that I don't understand, which is I'm the coach, you're the manager. You shouldn't be doing anything, manager. Don't tell your people what to do. You go sit in the corner and be quiet. And then the coach proceeds to do the exact same thing the manager was doing. It's like, you're just telling people what to do now, right? That's not a way to win favors with the manager. And you need the managers to influence change. Without their power to make change, you're not getting any change. So the last people you want to make angry and to get resisting you is the managers. You want to get on their side. I see people like coming at it like this with managers, and really the fix is to get both on the same side, right? You want to be a partner with the manager and look at what the problem is and how do we tackle the manager's problem. Your manager wants to tell people what to do. Your manager wants reports that don't make sense. That's okay. Find out what problem they're trying to solve. The manager keeps pulling people off of teams and putting them on other teams. Find out why. What's happening? There's a real reason those things are happening. And when you can be a partner with them and help them solve those problems, the other change you can make happen, right? So when we take a coaching approach to interacting with individuals, it's much easier to influence, right? There's there's an approach that says, I'm going to tell you what to do. And there's an approach that says, I'm going to trust you to know how to solve your own problems. If you think about trying to force people to change, another great example of our inability to force people to change. Most of us are women here, which means most of us have probably been in a situation in our life where we're like, I need to lose 5 pounds or 20 pounds or 50 pounds, right? I need to lose weight. How successful would it be for someone? I see Sasha's on the call. Let's pick on Sasha. If Sasha came to you and said, you know what? You need to lose 5 pounds. You need to take that cookie out of your mouth. Don't eat that cookie. You need to get on this, you need to weigh yourself every day. You need to get on that treadmill, right? Do you think you would lose 5 pounds? Probably not, right? And when he leaves, you're going to get 2 cookies instead of 1 cookie, right? He might get compliance, but he's not going to get true change. The only way that you can make a true change and have true influence is for the people you're working with to have the power. And that takes a coaching approach. And so I'd like to ask you, what are some of the skills you think are involved in a coaching approach? I'll pull this down. What are some of the skills you think are there?
Active listening. Let's start with that. Yeah.
Yeah, active listening, just listening, period. How many people don't get listened to ever? You can be the different person who listens. What else?
I would say powerful and open-ended questions. No questions that are going to prompt a yes or no.
Yes, open-ended questions. And I would say, I would clarify powerful a bit more as transformational. And the difference is, I think powerful questions, often people just kind of get this thinking that, well, if I ask an open-ended question, it's going to be powerful. I think what makes a question powerful is a whole lot of luck, and you know how to phrase a question, because it's got to be the right question at the right moment in this right situation. And tomorrow it might be the same question might not land. So I look at it more as transformational questions versus transactional questions. If I'm asking transactional questions, I'm asking you about stuff you already know. And I just want you to transfer the data in your head to my head. That way I can solve your problem. In a coaching approach, I'm not trying to solve your problem. I'm trying to partner with you to solve your problem. Right. And so if I'm asking you transformational questions instead, what I'm asking is questions about what you don't already know. I'm asking forward-facing questions. So the difference in how they sound might be, if I'm asking a transactional question, it might sound like, well, what happened? Well, what did you do when that happened? Those are transactional. The person already knows those answers. They're not learning anything. You want to ask transformational questions. Instead, they know what happened. You don't need to know what happened. They need to know what happened. Instead, you can ask, what would you prefer to have happen? How do you want it to be instead? How do you want to respond the next time that happens? Right. So can you see the difference between transactional and transformational? And so if you think about using transformational questions in the work you're doing, you're seeing something happen in the organization and maybe they're struggling. How do you think transformational questions can help people to take ownership of their own change?
I think it helps peel back the onion, right? Like you're giving them some framework and a little bit of guidance, but like you're asking them to look within. And I think as coaches, we know that most people already have the answer. they already have the insight. We're all very intuitive people. We all have that gift in some way, some maybe in different forms or different levels. But I think our job as coaches is to help them see that for themselves, that they already have the solution, they already have the answer, and those questions help them uncover that. And I think that's the gift of coaching, is when we can get them to recognize that themselves.
Right. Right. When you get people thinking and coming up with their own solution, they're more bought into that solution. Right? And if someone is not ready to make a change, it doesn't matter how much you push, they're not going to change. Right. So you want to focus on what they want to change. And then that will help what they want to change and how they want to change it. If they need input, then fine, give them input. But hold your input lightly. Right? They don't have to do it your way. As a consultant, as a coach, I make recommendations and it's up to them. And if they don't do it, that's fine. I'm going to support them with whatever that decision is. We get down the road a little bit, they may find out their way's not working, and great. Well, what do we want to try now? Let's experiment a bit more. The reality is my solution might not work for them. They know their environment better than I do, right? One of the keys to having influence when you don't have authority is asking questions. Actually, I would say a key is asking not questions, even if you do have authority, asking, not telling. I coach a lot of executives and a lot of people who are struggling to get their teams to do stuff. And it comes down to, when I hear you talk, I hear you telling a bunch of people what to do, but I don't hear you asking anybody what to do. Right? No wonder they're not bought in. You just told everybody what to do. You want people to take to be empowered, and you want people to have ownership and responsibility and accountability, but really all they can be is puppets because you just keep telling them what to do. When you tell people what to do, that means that the responsibility and accountability falls to you, because they're just following orders. Right? So we do better to ask than to tell. Something I say all the time to companies is, it's interesting. You hire the best people you can find. You pay them the best salary you can pay them. You've got highly skilled people, many of them getting paid 6 figures. And then you hire them for everything they know. And then you bring them in and you're like, don't use any of that. Just do what I told you to do. You can hire people out of high school for that. I mean, really, why would you spend this amount of money when you could just hire people out of high school? Right? So we want to leverage people's intelligence. We want to leverage their power and let them solve things. If you're trying to do everything, then you can't even get your arms around everything. Leverage the power of the people and let them figure out how they want to do it. It's okay if it doesn't look like you would do it. It's totally okay. What we want to focus on is not outputs. Here's the stuff you're doing. I'm focused on what you're doing every day. You want to focus on outcomes. What's the problem we're trying to solve, and how will we know it's solved? Just get me to how it's solved. Get me to solved. I don't care how you get there, right? Let them figure it out. What's the outcome we're looking for? And they can experiment. And some things will work and some things won't. Are you making progress? That's what matters. So coaching skills, asking questions, making observations. This is what I see. What do you see? This is what I'm observing. How do y'all see it? What would you like to do with that information? Right? Just because you make an observation doesn't mean that you need to prescribe what to do. right? I'm noticing that people seem to be confused about what's happening. How do y'all want to clear that confusion? Not, this is what we need to do, let's go do this. People are confused. Let me step in and fix it. People don't want to be fixed. Make it apparent. The coaching skill is to make things transparent, is to make things transparent so that they can figure out what to do with them. This is how you partner with the company, and this is how people want to work with you. Okay. I hear a lot of coaches saying that, yeah, I start working with companies and teams don't want to work with me. I'm working with a new company the last month or so, and I've got people pulling on me constantly for help, full teams. They're like, yes, please come to our stuff. Please come work with us. Please help us. Please tell us what to do, right? Even though I'm not going to tell them what to do. Why? Because I started with conversations about, you tell me what's painful to you. It is not important to me what I think you're doing right or wrong. It's irrelevant what I think you're doing right or wrong. You tell me what's in your way. You tell me what's frustrating you. You tell me what's making you feel ineffective, and I will partner with you to solve that, however we need to solve it. Well, everybody wants that kind of help. It's all about relationship. At the end of the day, can you build coaching relationships? I often get the question about, well, how do I start a coaching engagement? Well, you start it by building relationship, right? If you've got people who they don't want to work with you, leave them alone. Don't fight against resistance. That's the worst thing you can do. As humans, we've got this crazy thing that happens, like people are resisting us and we want to go and make them listen. I want to make you do this. You're getting in my way, right? You're stopping me from being successful. All you're going to do when you fight against resistance is create more resistance. There are enough people that need your help and that want your help that you can ignore all the resistors and just focus on the people who want help. And by the time those people have all been helped, the resistors usually will either have come around or they have quit. And so you don't really have to deal with that anyway. You create the momentum on the side of change and use the momentum of people who want change and who want help and let them build success. And as they build success, other people are like, hey, we want some of that. Before I got into coaching, let me pull this down. Before I got into coaching, I worked in a bank, and it was kind of funny because my peers called me downhill because all of the departments that were broken, they would give them to me. And so, it all rolled downhill to me. And the way that I handled those departments, because it was usually what it might be considered like a hostile takeover, right? It was usually, we fired your boss who you loved because you didn't have to do any work because they just let you do nothing. And then we moved you on to Cherie, who's not like that, right? And so I would inherit whole departments of people who were angry because they got a new boss that they didn't want, and the boss that they loved got fired, and then all of a sudden they had to do work. And so the way I did that, it was so beautiful. I wouldn't even fool with them, right? I would take somebody from one of my other departments who was like a high achiever and who was like, yes, I like change and I want to go do something and I'm looking for new work to do. And I would just take them and I would transplant them into that department. And I would work with that person or two people, and they would be doing the same work as everyone else, but we'd be working together, figuring out how can we do this better? How can you make this happen? And so what would happen is the people who were sitting around them would be like, how are you getting all this stuff done? Wait, how are you accomplishing that? What are you doing? And then they would just say, well, I mean, I'll show you if you want. And so then people just started coming over. And by the end of it, I'd usually have 2 or 3 people left who were like, yeah, we're not buying into that. And it was often like, I had multiple layers of management underneath me, and it was often those managers. And then they just quit and everybody else was happy. And so it would take a few months, but at the end of the day, people want to be successful. And so if you just give them the opportunity to be successful, they'll do that. Okay. All right. So what questions or comments, thoughts do you have that I haven't already spoke about? Or maybe you've got some objections to what I've said. Love to have a conversation about that.
I'd love your
Um,
insight. Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
I just have a question, regarding your approach, which is more like asking the powerful questions, being an active listener. Do you get resistance from people that are expecting you to just give them the answer? And like, how do you deal with somebody who has that expectation where like you are the fixer?
That's a good question. So I think there's a few things I do. First, I make it clear up front. It doesn't do any good for me to do the work here because I'm leaving. And when I'm gone, everything's going to roll back. So you need to take ownership of the change. So when I'm gone, you can keep going, right? And I recognize the fact that they do hire me as a consultant, not just as a coach. The difference is the way I do consulting is different. So I don't just answer, you ask me a question, I'm going to tell you what to do. I'm going to ask questions and understand what's happening first. And then I'll give a few suggestions. I usually don't give one suggestion like, okay, here's the way we need to fix it. Every once in a while I will, because I have enough history behind me to know like the core of your problem is this. It's often something like the core of your problem here is you're never going to deliver faster as long as you've got a front end team and then a back end team and then a whatever integration team, and because you've got to do things through 3 sprints just to get there, right? I'll often say what I really recommend is that you change this, your organizational structure. How would that work if you did that here, right? What would need to happen to do that? And so it's still that process of questioning. Here's an answer and let's talk through it and you have the power to make this decision. Most of the time, I don't have like one answer. It's like, okay, so what you're trying to get to is this. I have a few suggestions I've seen other people do. I've seen some people do this. I've seen others do it like this, and I've seen some do this. What ideas does that give you? Right? Or how would something like that work in this environment? Right? But I don't go into a whole lot of detail about, okay, here's all the steps. I mean, I literally give them 2 sentences. And it's what I'm doing is I'm trying to provoke their thought process, right? Because the reality is it doesn't matter what I've seen. It's not necessarily going to work here. They know their environment. And so I want to put the power in their hands. I'm just feeding more data into that conversation. Does that help?
So it's
Yeah.
less mentoring than and more just kind of seeding thoughts.
Right. And I'm not trying to, what I'm not doing is what people would call Socratic method. In coaching, that would be called manipulating. Right. I'm not trying to manipulate people. I have an answer and I'm going to ask you a series of questions to get to my answer. If I have an answer that I'm that holding tight to, I'm just going to give you the answer. Right. I'm not going to manipulate you to get to my answer. When I'm asking questions, I'm really trying to understand and help you to understand. So, and a lot of times the big question I'm asking is, what's the problem we're trying to solve? Right. Everybody starts with the solution, but I don't know if we're clear what the problem is. Right. What other thoughts? I think, Mary, you had something you were going to add.
Yeah, I was going to ask about just maybe some more of your thoughts around creating that sense of partnership. And so, some of the examples that come to mind are um, the interesting perspective that the Agile coach sort of outranks the Scrum Master, right? There's this hierarchy in coaching, right? This crazy, so we're not really good at partnering even with other coaches. Like, I think that's a skill and a practice that we're all trying to step into. And yet when we're in an organization where there's a hierarchy, there's this my story is there's this tendency for that hierarchy to try to seep into the relationship and sort of disrupt the partnership. So could you share other advice, other thoughts, other things that you've done that have worked to really create that sort of sense of side by side, we're looking at the problem together?
Yeah. And so I think a big part of that is any type of coaching relationship you're going to have, whether it's with a team or with a scrum master or a manager or whoever, you want to start with a relationship agreement, right? It's how are we going to work together and what are our roles here? What's your part? What's my part? And I'm always really clear. I'm not over you. I'm not under you either, right? If I'm working with an executive, I'm not over you or under you. If I'm working with a scrum master, I'm not over you, I'm not under you. I'm a partner with you, right? And so I see everybody as all of my clients, I see them there as peers, right? Even when I was a full-time employee, my boss, I didn't view him as above me. In my mind, all humans are created equal, therefore we are all equal. I don't care how much you make. I don't care where you are on the food chain. I don't care how old you are, what color you are, or any of those other things. We are equals. And so we're partners. And so that's a big part of it, is knowing that we're partners. And there's going to be things that I know that you don't know, and I'm happy to share them with you, not shove them down your throat. And there's things that you know that I don't know, and I need to depend on you to do those things. Right? I worked as I had this really interesting position when I first got into Agile, very first Agile job. I didn't even know what Agile was. I got hired as a VP of technology. And it was a Scrum Master role. Well, I didn't even know what Scrum Master was because I didn't know what Scrum was, right? I was like lost as a goose. And so I was working with the team, and I was like, look, I recognize that on the food chain, from the company's perspective, I'm your boss because in that company, that's the way it was. And our relationship is different than that, right? It doesn't matter where I sit on the food chain. I trust you to know your job and to do your job. I trust you to know what the work is. I trust you to decide how much work needs to be done. I trust you when you say something can't be done or we shouldn't do it, I'm going to trust you. And what I need you to do is trust me in what I know. And I'm managing the people and the stakeholders and whatever else, right? And so if you trust me, I will have your back. And I'm going to trust you because I have no choice but to trust you because I have no clue what you do. Right. And so we can be partners in this. And we had some really great partnerships and it worked well together. I had no clue what they did because I really didn't even go and learn Scrum till after I left that job. Right. But it worked because I was like, hey, we're partners in this. You've got stuff, I got stuff. Let's do this together. Does that help? Okay.
Can I pick up on something there? I know what I know, and that the idea that I don't know what you do, so I'm going to trust that you can do it. How does that apply when, like, how much knowledge of what they actually do in terms of, say, an application or a product or a service, a group you're coaching, what they actually are delivering? How much does the coach need to know about that? Or is it really at the kind of human and process level?
I guess it depends on what you're trying to do as a coach, right? I I mean, you have to have the capacity to learn and hear conversations and pick up and understand what's happening, the context, right? You have to have the capacity to understand the context around technology, right? When developers are having conversations, I get what they're talking about. Can I do it? Please don't let me anywhere near your code, right? Don't do that. That's the worst thing you could do. Right. But I have the capacity to understand what they're talking about. And if I don't understand something, I'll ask to explain to me what this means, or more likely I'll just look it up. Like, I didn't know what an API was. Well, let me go read that and find out what that is. What is a service? I don't know what that is. Okay, cool. Now I get it. But I rarely get into the actual work they're doing. I'm focused on how they're figuring out how to do the work. And I never get in, ever. You can give me access to Cherie if you want to. I'm never going to use it. That's not my job, right? Or whatever tool you're using. I don't get into the tool and I don't get into the work because that's their job and I trust them to do their job. I'm looking at the system and how the system's operating. What else?
So I have a question. This is Lisa. So I'm a Scrum Master from a consultant standpoint, and prior to this engagement, I've been kind of a Scrum Master embedded in the organization, so it's kind of a different lens for me. But one of the issues that I'm experiencing with my team is that the company that I'm working for has a third party that they've hired for their development, and most of them have been in this engagement for maybe 6 months or less. So as a Scrum Master, how can I kind of help get the product owner and the manager to give up that command and control and the need to be like really down in the weeds with the technical implementation for their work? Because I've had discussions of like, I understand how impassioned you are to get things as done as it can be for the team so they can run off and go. We need to do kind of training for them to get that architecture and that understanding so you feel more comfortable letting them, you know, take the reins and go. But I haven't had success yet. So what suggestions do you have for me in that regard?
Yeah, I would say if I listened to your approach, it's a common approach of here's what I see you're doing that you shouldn't be doing, and how can we get you to do something different? And if I look at that from the manager and product owner's point of view, they've got no incentive to change because what they're doing is solving a problem for them, right? And so the question is, what's the problem that they have that by being embedded so deeply in the team and being in the weeds, that's the solution to that problem. And so by identifying the problem they're trying to solve and saying, okay, well, team, how are we going to solve that problem, right? So if the team doesn't want them down in the weeds, then the team has to solve the problem that they have that's keeping them in the weeds. And when the team can solve that problem, then they can trust to get up out of the weeds, right? That's one simple answer that may or may not be the right answer in your scenario, right? I also use a technique that comes from Management 3.0, and it's called delegation poker, and it's basically I use it as a model. It's a model of delegation and levels of authority. And what it basically talks about is at what level of authority do you, it comes from both positions. Like there's the beginning that is, I make all the decisions and I own everything, all the way to you go do your job. If you need me, let me know. Right. And so there's 7 levels of delegation. And it's having that conversation with the team and the managers about, for this specific thing, what level of delegation should it be? And team, if you're being held, or if I say, if team, if you want more freedom, more empowerment, what do you need to do that is going to make the manager feel comfortable giving you that? And manager, if you're feeling this need to hold things under control, what is it the team needs to do to enable you to be able to like let a little bit, right? And so what I don't try to do is go from level 1 to level 7. If I can go from level 1 to level 2 or 3, that's improvement. And then we can build trust right there. And then we can go to level 4 or 5 and go up from there.
I
And
love
so
that, Cherie, that we're looking at the micro improvements. And unfortunately, I hate to interrupt you. However, we're getting extremely close to the end of our time box. So everybody, I want to thank you very much for connecting tonight. Cherie, thank you so much for everything you shared. There's been, you've probably not had an opportunity to look at chat, but it's been blowing up. And thank you for everybody who was engaged and asked questions. We really appreciate that. I'm going to just very quickly share my screen again because I want to just point out that you have other ways to connect with Tampa Bay Women in Agile. We have some of those listed here. And then also too, we love to hear from y'all. And if there's anything that y'all would like to contribute to the organization, we have a email account. Let's see what's up here. And you might reach out. I think Diana may also
I'm going to post it.
post.
Yeah, I will post it in the chat.
Great. Thank you so much, everybody. We are expecting to, we're kind of working on something for September. We don't know if that's going to happen, but we do have something lined up for October. Diana, would you like to give us just a little sneak preview about what that's about?
Yes, so October is going to be very exciting. Missy Morano, she's an improv artist, she's called the Improv Agilist, and she's going to be giving a talk in October. And it's very exciting on learn how improv can make your work new, honest, and fun. And I think that's going to be really interactive and an exciting conversation. In November, we have Joanne Stone, who's going to be speaking on wicked agility, agile, and planetary changes. So that sounds right up my alley too. So, really great speakers lined up. If anyone's interested for September, we want to start planning that soon. Please reach out to our email. If you recommend a speaker, please also send us that information. I think, Cherie, you're such an amazing speaker tonight. And, the more we can bring in sharing all of our experiences and great topics, I think, this is such a special place to share that. So thank you all for joining.
Yeah, thank you, Cherie, again. We really appreciate your time and your energy and everything you've shared and contributed. So we really appreciate that. And we look forward to seeing our other participants soon. Everybody have a wonderful evening, and we look forward to chatting again.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you
everybody.
so much. This was great.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, thank you.
Saving that chat. Bye, everyone.